Hello, everyone. This is episode 2 of Talking Politics with Dr. Brian Baker. I am he is me, and I am looking forward to what we're going to get into today as we continue to ask this question about how do we leverage our resources? How do we leverage our power in order to make a difference and make sure that the people we elect, the people that we choose to represent us, are doing the things that we want them to do. Now, we really started asking some questions yesterday that I think is very important. When we ask the question, what are you voting for? I want you to think about that as we look at some statistics, some data that's out there that might be intriguing for you. And at the same time, how do we look at what's going on and implement a strategy that makes a difference for everyone involved? Because that's what we need. We need a strategy. And when I say we, I'm talking about we, the people, need a strategy for how we're going to deal with all of the issues that we're facing. How are we going to actually make it so that the government is working for us, that we are not trying to just let things be the way they are and we have no say? No, we, the people, that's what we need to do, is actually exercise our power, our voting power, our economic power, the ability to get results. We have a responsibility as constituents to say, this is what we want, this is what we're going to ask for, demand, and this is what we're going to get. Okay. So what I want to do is first I always like to give some definitions because I think that's very helpful, and ask questions, and then I'll give you some data, just get you to think about what is actually happening. And I'm using my home state of Florida as a perfect example, as again, we talked about moving into the midterm elections here in November. There's going to be a lot going on at the congressional level. And I just want to, again, put out some things that you can go back and look for yourself, and you'll find it. You can go out there and do the research for yourself, and you'll see that I'm not making this up. Okay, so first thing that I want to do is give you a definition for strategy. Strategy is a deliberate plan or set of actions designed to achieve long-term goals by effectively using available resources. So when I talk about us as a voting bloc, all of us, where we need to have a deliberate plan or set of actions that's going to help us achieve long-term goals. I think that's where a lot of folks are missing it. They're trying to achieve short-term goals, but not really thinking about how does this help us or impact us in the long run. So strategy is something that we need to be paying close attention to as we move towards not only the midterm elections, but as we move beyond the midterm elections and you start talking about the presidential race in 2028. What is the strategy to get people to want to vote for people of their choosing? All right. And using our available resources, well, what resources do we all have? We all have a voice. We all have agency to do things that will have an impact wherever we're at. So you don't have to try to change the world, but you can change your world by doing something. All of us can do something. So what I am trying to do right now is just provide some education on what things are actually like, and not allow propaganda or any type of lies. I'm not even going to say that. Yeah, it's just people lying. Let's just be honest. There's a lot of that going on as well. Misinformation, disinformation. I call it lying because that's what it is if you're not telling the truth. I want to stick to the facts. I want to make sure that we are telling things as they are, not as just someone's opinion, but what is actually happening. So strategy. What do we have going on, for example, in Florida? And the question I asked yesterday was, what are you voting for? What exactly are you voting for? When you go into that voting booth, what are you voting for? Are you voting for something that's going to make your life better? Are you voting for things that's going to have an impact on your life in the long run? Or are you just voting based on someone's party affiliation? They got a D or an R next to their name, so you just vote with this or you vote with that, but you really haven't put any attention into what exactly is it that this person stands for? How are they going to impact your community? How is it that they're going to do things that's going to help you in the long run? So for me today, I'm not just looking at, all right, well, whoever it is, if it's blue, I'm going to vote for it no matter who. That's not how it is. What it's going to be is me looking at what does this person stand for? What are they trying to do that's going to help me and my family and my community? How are they going to have a positive impact on my life? And if I can't see it in the policies that they're claiming that they're going to actually pursue, then that's going to throw up a red flag for me. Now, let's look at the state of Florida for a second here, because I really want you to think about this. I want you, if you have an opportunity, you can go to the U.S. News and World Report, so you don't have to take my word for it. It's U.S. News and World Report, and there's actually rankings. There's rankings of each state. What is good about it, what's not so good about it, what are some things that we can pay close attention to. And I'm just going to read a few things that's very interesting about the state of Florida, for example. Now, for those who may not know this, Florida is the third most populous state in the union. There are more than 23 million people that live in the state of Florida. 23 million. Okay, so that's a lot of folks. That's a lot of folks that we have to pay attention to. Now, not only that, but the state of Florida also has right now, as of 2026, and you can go to the Florida Division of Elections page, the Florida Department of State. You can go to their website and it has voter registration by party affiliation. That is right there on the website. So I'm not making it up. And it shows the number of people who are registered as Republicans, those who are registered as Democrats, those who are in minor parties, and those who are no party affiliation, or what we would consider them to be are the independents. So you have 23 million people, 23,372,215 people, according to the U.S. News and World Report, that live in the state of Florida. According to the Florida Division of Elections, when you go to the Florida Department of State webpage, you can see that there are 13,361,000 registered voters out there. So these totals reflect the number of active, and that's very important because it's in bold, active registered voters in the state of Florida. That doesn't mean that there aren't more out there who can register. It just means these are the people that have actually registered. They're active, and 13,361,000 registered voters who are active in the state of Florida as it currently stands as of April 30th, 2026. Very important numbers. Now, 5,533,497 people are registered as Republican, but that only accounts for about 41.4% of active registered voters in the state of Florida. So this idea, and this is where I want to bring it to the Democratic Party, when you think about this, the idea that Florida is somehow just a ruby red state, well, that's not true. The numbers don't bear that out. The numbers don't suggest that, you know what, there are just like 13,361,000 registered voters, active registered voters in the state of Florida, and 12 million of them are registered Republicans. That is not the case. In fact, when we look at these numbers, you're talking about what, 58.6% of the entire population in the state of Florida who are registered active voters. 58.6% of them are not registered Republicans. Now, that is a pretty significant number. So this idea that, well, the Democrats have no way of winning the governorship or winning statewide races, that's not necessarily the case. And we talked about gerrymandering yesterday. We talked about how gerrymandering is one of those deals where it's manipulation. But when it comes to these statewide races, governor, secretary of state, you're talking about attorney general, these are statewide races where there is not a lock, and particularly in this election, when we think about, Governor Ron DeSantis, he is termed out here where he's had his 2 terms coming up in January. So you got to really think about this. You have a pretty open race. And I think Byron Donalds and some other folks are in it, and they're trying to vie for that governorship. But the reality is that it's going to be a tight race. It's going to be a tight race because there are a lot of unknowns. 5.5 million people, right, are registered Republicans, 4 million are registered Democrats, and you have 3.38 million people who are no party affiliation. And that is an X factor that if anyone, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, should be looking at and saying, okay, that is a lot of people, and we don't know really how they're going to go. Now, when we look at the actual data, going back to the U.S. News and World Report, we look at some of these rankings where you have an overview of Florida and you can look at some of these ranking details. There are some interesting things that start to show up. We look at education, right? Education is very important. And right now in the state of Florida, it talks about 45% of the population out there. You're looking at college educated, 45%. That's a lot of people. A lot of people are educated in this state. Not surprising, right? When you think about the number of folks that higher education ranks at number 2, when you think about education is ranked at number 1, but pre-K through 12 is ranked at 22. And I will say this too, just to give you an idea, number 2 in education in all of the states in the union. That's pretty significant. Number 2. So a lot of educated folks live here in the state. And I think that if we don't pay close attention to that going into this election, that there might be some surprises. And we've already seen some when you think about Miami but actually electing a mayor, a Democratic mayor for the first time in a while. That is pretty significant. And there's been some things that have happened in some local races, thinking about in Mar-a-Lago, where you had a flip to a Democrat. That's something that wasn't expected, and it probably wouldn't have happened maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, but it certainly has happened now. So the question that all of these strategists out here for their respective parties have to ask the question is, well, what changed? What changed? Number one. Number two, are you sure that by gerrymandering, changing the maps for the congressional races, that's going to end well? Are you sure about that? Or are you projecting that? Because again, when we look at voter registration, we're talking about active registered voters. Now, I don't know if all these people actually voted, say, for example, in the 2024 election. I would seriously doubt that. I would say now, based on the things that's been happening in recent months, it's a high probability that the voter turnout is going to be pretty significant. And if I were a Republican strategist, if I were a Republican candidate in the state of Florida, I would be extremely concerned about changing the maps from what they currently are, because you don't know how people are going to vote with the new maps, for number one, and two, knowing that, okay, there's only 41.4% of the population in this state that's actually registered Republicans, and we don't know what that 3.3 million of non-party affiliation is going to do. So we might want to pay close attention to what's happening. And having lived here most of my life, I can say this: there are a lot of people coming and going, and there's a lot of shifting going on, and I just don't know where everyone's political affiliations lie at this point. There's been a lot of things that's happened. Growth has been substantial in this state. People are coming and going, and you just don't know exactly what's going to happen once you start tinkering with the maps. You might get an advantage if you're a Republican, but you might not. And this is a very interesting year that's going to take place with the governorship. I wouldn't be surprised if it flips to blue. I wouldn't be surprised at all, because there are a lot of people that aren't happy with the cost of living in the state. They're not happy with a lot of things, just because it is expensive to live in certain parts of Florida. Just to give you an idea of what that means, opportunity ranking. Opportunity ranking, when you look at the ranking and scorecard with the U.S. News and World Report, opportunity is number 47. Number 47. Now, when we talk about opportunity, affordability is at number 44, economic opportunities at 35, and equalities at 17. Meaning what? Meaning that there are a lot of folks. When we think about what's happening in the state of Florida, there are a lot of people that's like, it's expensive to live here. And there are quite a few folks that have decided to leave the state because it is expensive. So when we start looking at how things are set up for the state, yes, there are a lot of good things that are happening here. Education is good. The economy is pretty good. and overall, but when you start looking at the opportunities, I can say things have gotten quite expensive over the last few years. So when we look at inflation, folks are paying more than $4 at the pump. I just spent, $50 just to fill up my gas tank because it's over $4 a gallon at the pump. I can assure you that for those who are not able to afford that as much, they're not going to be happy about that, just having to put so much money into their gas tank. That is a sunk cost, as I have learned it many times, many years ago. So just thinking about this, though, in the state of Florida, is it a competitive state? Is it a state that Democrats can actually pick up some seats? It is. Is it a state where a Democrat can be elected as governor? It is. Is it a ruby red state? It is not. The numbers don't support that. The voter registration doesn't indicate that it is a ruby red state. It is still very purple. It may not feel that way for some people. And I will say this, at the national level, the Democratic Party needs to put a huge investment into the state of Florida if they want to see some things change. And I know that there are some people trying to do that, but I can tell you that there needs to be a much more heavy investment if you want to see even more balance and more purple in the state. But I will say this before we get out of here for today. Don't forget that Barack Obama, right? Barack Obama did win the state of Florida, and that wasn't that long ago. So when people start thinking that, oh, it can't be done, actually, it has happened. A Democrat winning in the state, it can happen. And I think that if we just kind of look at the map, the election results, excuse me, when you think about that, I just wanted to pull that up. Barack Obama did beat John McCain. This was in 2008, and he did beat Mitt Romney in 2012. So an idea that a Democrat can't win the state of Florida, I don't know where that's come from, because we've seen that happen twice from a presidential level. We've seen that happen twice in the last 20 years. So I don't know where this thought that it can't happen or that this state is now somehow lost. That needs to be erased from the minds of the National Party for Democrats. And I think the Republicans, they know that it's not nearly as red as they might want to project it to be. So what's going to happen at the midterms? That's going to be interesting. What's going to happen in 2028 for the presidential election? That's going to be even more interesting now that Donald Trump won't be able to run for a third term, according to the Constitution. That's not supposed to happen. So what is going to happen over the next couple of years in the state of Florida? I would say people should pay very close attention to what is happening here. All right, so we're going to let it lie there for today, and we'll come back and talk about some more things. I'm not done with Florida. I'm not done with anything when it comes to speaking politics, talking about politics, just breathing it in, because we got to think about the strategies that's going to help all of us moving forward. Until next time, keep looking, keep reading, keep watching.